My name is Father Jonah, and on January 24, 2025, I died. It wasn't how I expected it to happen. There were no long goodbyes, no time to make peace with my enemies, and no final confession to a brother priest. I had been a priest for 20 years in a mid-sized parish just outside of Boston. To everyone looking in, I was a good man, a successful man. I chanted the liturgy with a strong, resonant voice that people admired. I managed the parish budget effectively, ensuring we always had a surplus. I gave sermons that were safe, comforting, pleasantly intellectual, and exactly 12 minutes long. I knew how to navigate the politics of the diocese, how to smile at the bishop, and how to calm down angry parishioners. But if I'm being honest with you, and I have nothing left to lose, so I must be, Christianity had become a job to me. It was a career. I was a manager of religion, a dispenser of sacraments, a professional keeper of the peace. I loved the smell of candles and the weight of the golden cross around my neck. I loved the respect I got when I walked into a room wearing my cassock. But God was a distant concept, a boss I worked for but never actually spoke to. I didn't fear death because I thought I had the paperwork filed correctly. I was Orthodox. I was a priest. I had performed the rituals. I was safe. Or so I thought. That Friday night, I was driving home after a parish council meeting. It had been a long, grueling meeting where we had argued for 2 hours, not about the spiritual state of our youth or the poor in our neighborhood, but about the color of the new carpet in the fellowship hall. One faction wanted blue, the other wanted burgundy. I had spent the entire evening mediating this petty dispute, using all my diplomatic skills to prevent a schism over flooring. I was exhausted, and frankly, I was cynical. It was snowing, a wet, heavy snow that turned to ice the moment it hit the asphalt. I was driving too fast, eager to get home to a glass of wine and the television. I remember coming around a sharp bend on the dark country road. The trees were coated in ice, looking like skeletal fingers reaching down. I remember the blinding white of headlights drifting into my lane. A truck had lost control. I remember the sound like a bomb going off, and then the crushing metal, the shattering glass, the sudden, violent compression of my chest. And then silence. Absolute heavy silence. I didn't float up toward a light. I didn't see a tunnel of clouds. One moment I was gripping the steering wheel, terrified, filled with adrenaline, and the next, I was standing on solid ground. But it wasn't the road. The snow was gone. The wreckage was gone. The pain in my chest was gone. I was standing in the middle of an enormous field that stretched out in every direction. The grass was knee-high and moved in a wind I couldn't feel. The sky above was a color I had never seen before. Not blue, not black, but a deep, living violet that seemed to vibrate with energy. The air didn't smell like gasoline or blood or winter. It smelled like ozone, like a thunderstorm that has just broken the heat, mixed with the scent of fresh, rich soil. I felt exposed. For the first time in my life, I couldn't hide behind my vestments, my title, or my education. I was just Jonah. I looked down at myself and saw that I was wearing plain clothes like a beggar. The golden cross was gone, the fancy cassock was gone, and I felt a terror so pure it made my knees shake. I realized instantly that my theology, my books, my arguments about carpet colors, and my routine were utterly useless here. This was a place of raw reality, and I was a man who had lived in illusions. Then I saw him. He wasn't floating in the clouds surrounded by cherubim. He was walking toward me across the field, his feet pressing firmly into the earth. He looked like a laborer, like a man who had been working with his hands all day. He was wearing a simple robe that looked rough, yet it shimmered like woven starlight, shifting colors as he moved. It was Jesus. I didn't need anyone to tell me. My soul knew him instantly, ancient and immediate. But this wasn't the gentle, passive figure from the stained glass windows I had ignored for years. This wasn't the buddy Jesus or the harmless teacher. This was a being of raw, terrifying power. His presence hit me like a physical wave, like standing next to a blast furnace. I wanted to run, but I couldn't move. I wanted to apologize for the carpet meeting, for my lack of prayer, for my numbness, for the years I had spent sleepwalking through the holy mysteries, but my tongue was frozen. When he stopped in front of me, I fell to the ground. I couldn't stand. The gravity of his holiness was too heavy for my lightweight soul. I expected anger. I expected him to list my sins, to shout at me for my hypocrisy. Instead, he reached down and touched my shoulder. His hand was heavy and warm, like the sun on a cold day. When I looked up into his eyes, I saw a fire that burned without consuming, a depth of love and sorrow that felt like it could crush me. He knew everything. He knew every time I had checked my watch during prayer. He knew every time I had judged a parishioner while smiling at them. He knew the secret coldness of my heart. It was all laid bare. He didn't speak with a voice like thunder, but his words vibrated in my chest, louder than any sound I'd ever heard. "Jonah," he said, "walk with me." He didn't wait for an answer. He turned and began to walk, and I scrambled to my feet to follow him. As we walked, the field began to change. The violet sky remained, but the landscape around us shifted, dissolving and reforming into a series of visions that I will never forget. We were suddenly walking through a vineyard. It was vast, stretching to the horizon. At first glance, it looked magnificent. The rows were perfectly straight. The leaves were a deep, glossy green, and the vines were thick and strong, laden with heavy clusters of purple grapes. "It is beautiful, Lord," I whispered, trying to sound reverent, trying to say the right thing. "A bountiful harvest." He stopped and looked at me. His face was not pleased. It was filled with a grief that looked like physical pain. "Look closer," he commanded. "Do not look with the eyes of a manager. Look with the eyes of truth." I stepped closer to one of the vines. I reached out to touch a leaf. It was cold. It was hard. It was plastic. I recoiled in shock. I looked around wildly. I touched the grapes. They were made of glass, cold and smooth. I touched the vine itself. It was wire wrapped in rubber, painted to look like wood. It was an artificial garden. It was a stage set. It looked perfect from a distance, but there was no life in it. No sap, no growth, no breath. "This is the church you built," he said, and his voice was quiet, but it shook the ground. "You and so many others. You paint the leaves green so they look alive. You polish the fruit so it shines under the lights. You build fences to protect it. You argue over the arrangement of the plastic branches, but there is no root." He waved his hand, and the ground beneath the vines became transparent. I looked down into the earth. The soil was dry, cracked, and dead, like dust. But deeper down, I saw tangled roots that were black and rotting. They were not drinking water. They were trying to eat the dry dirt, turning on themselves, starving, withered. "You offer the world a display," he told me. "You give them rituals that look like life, but you do not give them me. You are terrified of the mess of real growth, so you choose the safety of the artificial. Plastic does not need water. Plastic does not need pruning. Plastic does not die, but it never lives." I began to weep. "Lord, I didn't know. I thought I was keeping the tradition. I thought I was preserving the beauty." "You were keeping a museum," he replied. "I am not a curator. I am the vine. Without me, you can do nothing, and you have done nothing but manufacture appearances." He turned and kept walking, and the vineyard dissolved into gray mist. When the mist cleared, we were standing in a massive, cavernous building. It looked like a factory mixed with a cathedral. The ceiling was high and lost in shadows. Like the air was filled with a deafening noise, the sound of gears grinding, steam hissing, and hammers striking metal. I looked around and saw thousands of people. They were dressed in robes, suits, and uniforms. They were running back and forth, sweating, shouting orders, carrying heavy boxes. Giant conveyor belts ran through the center of the room. "What are they making, Lord?" I shouted over the noise. "Watch," he said. I watched. People were frantically working on a machine that produced boxes. Beautiful, ornate boxes wrapped in gold paper and tied with silk ribbons. They would take a box, bless it, sing over it, and then stack it on a pallet. I walked up to one of the open boxes before it was sealed. It was empty. I went to another. Empty. I ran to a third. Empty. The people were exhausted. I saw priests I recognized, bishops, famous preachers, hardworking volunteers. They were wiping sweat from their brows, congratulating each other on the production numbers. "Look at how many we made today," one shouted. "God will be so pleased with our output." But the boxes were filled with air. "This is the machinery of religion," Jesus said, standing beside me. The noise of the factory seemed to die down when he spoke, though the workers kept moving. They are busy, they are tired, they are dedicated, but they are not delivering the bread of life. They are delivering packaging. They love the box more than the treasure. They love the work more than the master. He looked at a group of men arguing over the color of the ribbons. blue or burgundy. It was my parish council meeting, magnified 1,000 times. They have forgotten that the box is meant to carry something, he said. They have replaced the presents with the program. Jonah, I do not need your exhaustion. I do not need your busy schedules. I need your heart. He walked on, and the factory faded. The floor turned to marble. We were now in a grand banquet hall. It was more luxurious than any palace I had ever seen. Chandeliers dripped with crystal. The tables were set with gold plates and silver goblets. Thousands of people sat at the tables. They were dressed in their Sunday best, suits, hats, fine dresses. They were smiling, they were polite, soft music played in the background. A feast, I said, feeling a flicker of hope. This must be the wedding feast. Is it? Jesus asked. Look at what they are eating. I walked to the nearest table. A well-dressed family sat there. The father reached for a platter and served his children. I looked at the food. It wasn't meat or bread. It was gray ash. It was dust. The man took a spoonful of ash, put it in his mouth, chewed, and swallowed. He smiled and wiped his mouth with a linen napkin. Delicious, he said. Such a blessing. The children ate the ash, their eyes sunken with starvation. They looked sick, weak, dying. But they kept eating the ash, smiling, and pretending it was a steak, pretending it was nourishment. I ran to the next table. It was the same. Bowls of dust, cups filled with sand, and everyone was pretending. They were complimenting the chef. They were talking about how full they were, but they were skeletons inside their fancy clothes. Why don't they stop? I cried out, horrified. Why do they eat this? Because it is safe, Jesus said. Real food requires a hunger that admits they are empty. Real food, my flesh and my blood, requires them to die to themselves. They prefer the ash of comfortable religion because it demands nothing of them. They are starving to death in the middle of a celebration. He pointed to a man at the head of a table, a priest. He was serving the ash from a silver bowl. The shepherds are feeding the sheep dust because they have forgotten where the green pastures are. They offer entertainment, politics, psychology, and motivational speeches. Ash. All of it is ash, and my people are dying of malnutrition. I turned away, sick to my stomach. Lord, feed them, please. I have set a table before them, he said softly, but they will not eat. They are too full of their own pride to taste my grace. The scene shifted again. The marble floor turned into cold tile. The smell of perfume was replaced by the smell of antiseptic and sickness. We were in a hospital ward. It was endless, row after row of beds. In the beds lay patients who were covered in terrible wounds. Some had gangrene. Others had open sores that looked infected and black. They were groaning in pain. Doctors and nurses in pristine white coats were walking among them. I watched a doctor approach a man whose leg was black with rot. The man was crying, "It hurts! Help me, please, cut it out!" The doctor smiled a soothing, fake smile. He patted the man's hand. Now, the doctor said. We don't want to be negative. Let's not talk about the rot. That's a harsh word. Let's just make you comfortable. The doctor took a syringe and injected the man with a sedative. The man's eyes glazed over. He stopped crying. He slumped back, smiling dreamily. The rot on his leg grew an inch while I watched. He needs surgery, I yelled at the doctor, but he couldn't hear me. He's dying. You're just drugging him. I saw another nurse putting a bandage over a festering wound without cleaning it. Out of sight, out of mind, she hummed cheerfully. Jesus stood at the foot of a bed. This is the hospital of the modern church, he said. My people are sick with sin, pride, lust, greed, hatred. It is eating them alive like a cancer. But the shepherds are afraid to operate. They are afraid to cause pain. They are afraid the patient will leave the hospital if the treatment is too harsh. He looked at me, and his eyes were fierce. So they give them painkillers. They preach sermons that soothe but do not save. They tell the dying man that he is fine, that he is destined for greatness while the infection kills his soul. They bandage the wound without cleansing it. This is not mercy, Jonah. This is murder. We didn't want to offend them, I whispered, the realization crushing me. We wanted them to like us. You loved their praise more than their lives, he said. A true physician cuts to heal. You have become dealers of spiritual narcotics. The hospital faded into a dark, stormy night. We were standing on a cliff overlooking a raging ocean. The waves were mountainous, crashing against the rocks with a roar that shook the earth. I saw a lighthouse standing on the cliff. It was tall, majestic, painted a bright white. It looked strong. Out in the dark water, I saw ships. Small boats, large vessels, all tossing in the storm. They were being smashed against the rocks. People were screaming, drowning, calling for help. "The light!" I pointed. "Why doesn't the lighthouse turn on the beam?" I ran toward the lighthouse. I burst through the door. I expected to see a keeper, a lamp, something. The inside of the lighthouse was a social club. It was warm and dry. There were comfortable leather chairs, a fireplace, and a coffee bar. People were sitting around laughing, playing games, reading books about the history of lighthouses. I ran up the spiral stairs to the top, to the lantern room. I reached the glass. There was no light. There was no bulb. There was no fire. The glass was painted yellow to look like light from the outside. I looked down at the people below. "There are people drowning," I screamed. "The ships are crashing. Where is the light?" One of the men looked up from his coffee, annoyed. "We are discussing the structure of the tower, Father. Please keep your voice down. We are a historical society, not a rescue team." I ran back outside. Jesus was standing at the edge of the cliff, the spray of the sea soaking his robe. He was looking at the drowning people, and tears were streaming down his face. "They built the tower to be seen, not to see," he said. "They love the idea of being the light of the world, but they do not want to burn. To give light, you must burn. You must be consumed. They want to be a lighthouse that never uses any oil." He turned to me. "A church that does not rescue is not a church. It is a club, and the blood of the drowning is on its hands." "I never rescued anyone," I admitted, my voice trembling. "I just maintained the building." "The building will fall," he said. "Only the lives you save will last." The storm suddenly stopped. The darkness lifted. We were standing in a construction site, but it was strange. I saw men and women building a tower. They were using bricks made of gold, silver, and precious stones. They were stacking them high, competing to see who could build the highest pillar. But I looked at the foundation. They were building on sand. The ground was shifting. Every time they added a heavy gold brick, the tower leaned. "Look at the foundation," Jesus said. I looked closer. The sand was made of books, but not the Bible. It was made of opinion polls, marketing strategies, cultural trends, and political ideologies. "They build on what is popular," Jesus said. They adjust the foundation every year to match the shifting sand of the world, and so everything they build, no matter how expensive, is doomed to collapse. As he spoke, a wind blew, a gentle wind of truth. The tower of gold bricks swayed, cracked, and then crashed down in a heap of rubble. The builders stood there, confused, blaming each other. "They do not build on the rock," Jesus said. "They build on their own relevance, and relevance is a foundation of dust." The final vision began to form. We were back in a natural setting, but it was desolate. It was a desert. The sun was scorching hot. I was thirsty, so thirsty my tongue stuck to the roof of my mouth. "I need water," I rasped. "Come," he said. He led me to a deep ravine, a muddy ditch at the edge of the desert. There was no grand river here, no crystal fountain, just a small, dirty stream of water trickling through the rocks and weeds. It looked insignificant, but kneeling by the water were people. I saw them clearly. There was a young woman with scars on her arms from cutting herself. There was an old man who looked like he had lost everything, wearing tattered clothes. There was a teenager weeping into his hands. There was a priest who had been stripped of his vestments, kneeling in the mud. They were not standing tall. They were on their faces. They were not eating ash or building towers. They were cupping the muddy water in their hands and drinking it like it was life itself. And where the water touched them, they glowed. Not with a plastic shine, not with a spotlight, they glowed from the inside out. A soft, warm, living light pulsed within them. Jesus walked down into the ditch. He didn't stand above them. He knelt in the mud beside them. He placed his hands on their heads. "This," he whispered to me, "is my church." I was shocked. "But Lord, they are so few. They are broken. They are dirty." "They are real," he said. "They know they are thirsty. They know they are nothing without me. They do not pretend. They have come to the end of themselves, and there they found me." He stood up, his hands dripping with the muddy water, and looked at me. The fire in his eyes was no longer terrifying. It was pleading. It was the look of a lover calling to his beloved. "Jonah, the season of pretending is over. The plastic garden will burn. The factory will rust. The banquet of ash will sicken everyone. The lighthouse with no light will be shattered by the storm. He stepped closer. But the water is still flowing. It is low. It is humble. You have to get on your knees to drink it. You cannot drink it while standing on a pedestal of pride. I want the water, I said, falling to my knees. Lord, I am tired of the ash. I am tired of the boxes. Give me the water. You cannot stay here, he said. The sadness returned to his voice. You must go back. No. I grabbed the hem of his robe. It felt like coarse wool and living electricity. Don't send me back. I don't want to go back to the arguments about carpet. I don't want to go back to the empty boxes. Let me stay here in the mud with you. He shook his head. The storm is coming, Jonah. A shaking such as the world has not seen. The structures of men will fall, and my people are asleep. They are playing with plastic while the hurricane approaches. He pulled me up to my feet. Go back. Tell them to stop painting the leaves. Tell them to tear up the artificial turf. Tell them to stop feeding the sheep dust. Tell them that I am not coming back for their institutions. I am coming for their hearts. They won't listen, I sobbed. I'm just a manager. I'm just a mediocre priest. You were a manager, he said firmly, gripping my shoulders. Now you must be a witness. Speak what you have seen. Blow the trumpet. If they listen, they live. If they do not, you have warned them. But do not be silent. He placed his hand over my eyes. Go. The heat of his hand was unbearable. It felt like my head was being split open by lightning. I woke up with a gasp that felt like breathing in fire. My body arched off the mattress. I was drowning in light, but it was the harsh, artificial light of a hospital room. He's awake. Get the doctor. I heard a scream. It was my wife, Elena. She was slumped in a chair next to my bed, looking haggard and terrified. I was in the ICU at Mass General. Machines were beeping frantically. I tried to move, but pain exploded in every inch of my body. Broken ribs, a fractured leg, a punctured lung, internal bruising. My chest felt like it had been crushed by a boulder. But my spirit was vibrating. It was humming with an energy that felt alien to this sterile room. I could still smell the ozone of the violet sky. I could still taste the ash of the banquet in my memory. I could still feel the warmth of his hand on my shoulder. It took me 3 weeks to get out of the hospital. The doctors called my survival a miracle of modern medicine. They talked about airbags, crumple zones, and lucky trajectories. They showed me x-rays. They explained the trauma to my body. I just stared at them. They were explaining the mechanics of the box, but they didn't know I had met the box maker. They didn't know I had walked through the plastic vineyard. I returned to my church in mid-March, just a few weeks ago. I was still on crutches, my body bent and broken. It was a Sunday morning. I hobbled into the sanctuary. The church was full. The sun was streaming through the stained glass. The choir was singing a complex, beautiful cherubic hymn. The incense smoke drifted in perfect, fragrant clouds. The deacons were moving with practiced precision, but all I could see was the plastic. I looked at the icons and I wondered if the people kissing them knew the person depicted, or if they were just kissing the wood. I looked at the congregation standing in their rows, and I saw the factory workers making empty boxes. I saw the people at the banquet eating ash. When it was time for the sermon, I didn't go to the pulpit. I couldn't climb the stairs. I stood on the steps of the altar, leaning heavily on my crutches. I looked out at the faces of my parishioners, people I had known for 20 years. They looked expectant. They wanted the 12-minute homily. They wanted the comforting joke. They wanted to be told they were good people. I didn't read the prepared text on the bulletin. I looked at them, and I felt a love so fierce it hurt. I didn't want them to die of starvation. We are dying, I said. My voice was raspy, weak, broken. It wasn't the booming voice of Father Jonah, the manager. It was the voice of a man who had seen the fire. We are starving to death while holding plastic fruit, I continued. The silence in the room was absolute. I told them everything. I didn't hold back. I told them about the crash. I told them about the violet sky. I told them about the gardener. I told them about the vineyard where the roots were eating the dirt. I told them about the hospital where the doctors killed with kindness. I told them about the lighthouse that had no light. We are playing church, I cried out, tears streaming down my face, dripping onto my vestments. We are arguing about carpet colors while the world drowns outside our doors. We are building towers on sand. Jesus is not impressed with our choir if our hearts are far from him. He is not impressed with our budget surplus if we are spiritually bankrupt. I pointed to the altar. He is not a concept. He is not a tradition. He is a consuming fire. And he is coming. He is coming for real fruit, not decorations. We must stop pretending. We must tear down the facade. We must get on our knees in the mud and drink the living water. I thought they would wake up. I honestly thought the Spirit would fall, that they would weep with me, that we would turn the church into a place of repentance right then and there. But the silence that followed wasn't the holy silence of conviction. It was the uncomfortable silence of embarrassment. People glanced at each other, some looked at their phones, a few mothers covered their children's ears. They looked at me with pity. Poor Father Jonah, their eyes said. The accident scrambled his brain. He's hysterical. After the service, the parish council president, the man who wanted the blue carpet, came to me in the vestry. He didn't ask about the vision. He didn't ask about the condition of his soul. He put a condescending hand on my shoulder and said, "Father, that was intense. You've been through a traumatic brain injury. You're emotional. The doctor said this might happen. Perhaps you came back too soon. You need more rest." "I don't need rest," I said, grabbing his arm. "We need repentance. Did you not hear me?" "Of course, Father, of course," he said, pulling away gently. "We all need to be better people. Now, why don't you go home and take your medication?" They didn't hear me. To them, I'm a broken man, a victim of PTSD. They are gentle with me, like you are gentle with a crazy person or a senile grandfather. 2 weeks later, the bishop called. He was very polite. He suggested that, for the sake of my health and recovery, I should take an extended leave of absence. I was removed from the schedule. They silenced the warning by calling it madness. But I cannot be silent. I am sitting in my living room now, my leg propped up, writing this. I have lost my pulpit. I have lost my reputation. My fellow priests have stopped calling. I am an embarrassment to the efficient machinery of the diocese. But I have found the water. We have started a small prayer group on Tuesday nights in my living room. There are only 5 of us. Me, Elena, who is slowly beginning to understand, a recovering addict named Mike, who knows what it means to be desperate, a college student named Sarah, who lost her faith because the church felt fake to her, and an older couple who left the church years ago because they were hurt by a judgmental priest. We don't have gold investments. We don't have a choir. We don't have incense or processions. We just have a Bible, a loaf of bread, and a desperate, aching hunger for the living water. We sit on the floor. We weep. We confess our real sins, not the polite ones, but the ugly ones. And in that living room, with no fanfare, Jesus is there. I feel the heat of his presence. I see the glow in their faces. I am writing this to you, whoever you are, because time is short. The clock is ticking, and the tower is leaning. Do not be deceived by the size of your church, the beauty of your liturgy, or the confidence of your pastor. Do not be deceived by the Christian label you wear. Ask yourself, is the fruit real? Is there life in the vine, or is it just plastic wire? Are you eating the bread of heaven, or are you choking on the ash of religious performance? Are you building a lighthouse that has no bulb? Jesus is not coming back for the managers. He is not coming back for the actors. He is not coming back for the people who want a safe, comfortable weekly hobby. He is coming for the thirsty. He is coming for the broken. He is coming for those who are willing to look like fools to the world in order to know him. He is coming for those who are willing to get their hands dirty in the soil of repentance. The gardener is at the gate. I have seen his eyes. They are full of fire and they are full of tears. Do not be found holding plastic fruit when he arrives. Find the water. It might be in the mud. It might be outside the beautiful walls you built. It might be in a place you despise, but find it, drink, and live. The violet sky is closer than you think.